but we can go live when, oh, looks like we're live. So welcome to the joint capital budget subcommittee meeting. We are joined as always by our Senate counterparts. Any opening comments, Chair Peters? Okay, let's get right into it. We start with the Maryland Environmental Service. Andrew Gray is our analyst. If you could hit high points for us, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully you're seeing the screen now. Maryland Environmental Service capital budget summary there for fiscal 22, $16.8 million in general obligation bond funding for the program. This compares to what was thought of what's going to happen last year, the 2020 CIP. It looked like there was going to be special funds from the transfer tax for this purpose. However, due to some changes in the budget, you're only seeing general obligation bonds in fiscal 2021 or 2022, excuse me, and the money goes down by $4.1 million relative to what was expected last year. In terms of the projects, there are 5 projects for the state side of things and 4 projects for the Department of Natural Resources funding projects, and those provide for a total of 9 projects listed on those pages there. One issue in this analysis talks about the transfer tax special funds. This funding has traditionally has come from, recently that is, has come from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to Maryland Environmental Service. The concern is about the timing and the funding level of that money coming over for projects in the state parks. The concern is that a certain amount has been authorized, as noted in the middle of the page here, but then the lower amount has actually been transferred, and then the funding's coming in later. So the DLS recommends the agency comment on that. In terms of pre-authorizations, there's funding for fiscal 23 and 24 in the capital budget to complete projects, to get them going. And then GO bond recommended actions are really there to approve the funding for 22 and then the pre-authorizations for 23 and 24. Unless there are any questions, that concludes the presentation.
Great, Mr. Gray. Thank you for the wonderful analysis. Any questions for the analyst? All right, thank you so much, Mr. Gray. Let's turn now to our agency, MES. We have Acting Director Charles Glass and his team. Please, any response to the analyst?
Good afternoon, Chairman Peters and Barnes, and distinguished members of the Capital Budget Subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. For the record, my name is Dr. Charles Glass. I'm the Acting Director of the Maryland Environmental Service. I'd like to take a moment and introduce my colleague, Ms. Ellen Burketic, Division Chief of Engineering. She manages our capital programs from the state. Also joining us today in the room are a few other key members of the executive team, should they be needed to call on. We also want to thank our analyst, Mr. Andrew Gray, for his work and collaboration throughout the budget season. You have a written testimony, so I will make my remarks very brief. We would be happy, of course, to answer any questions you may have. The Maryland Environmental Service had many challenges in 2020, but we also had successes. We celebrated our 50th year, realized strong financial performance, and faced unprecedented challenges due to COVID-19 pandemic and underwent a leadership change as well. With the changes in leadership came my promise to operate in an open and transparent manner. I will continue to work. Sorry about that. I will continue to work closely with the MES Board of Directors and will make every effort to operate in a manner consistent with our standing as an agency of the state of Maryland. MES takes that responsibility seriously and recognizes the important financial and operational responsibility we hold to our clients, the citizens of Maryland, and the regions in which we operate. Thank you, and we welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you so much. Any questions for the agency? All right, seeing none, thank you, sir. Thank you for being with us today. Appreciate it. Turning now to the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, our analyst is Jacob Cash. Mr. Cash, you are on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me share my screen. For the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services, there's only one project being funded in fiscal 2022. That is the electrical infrastructure upgrade in the Jessup region for $3.7 million. The planned funding for fiscal 2022 was much higher at just over $40 million, while current funding is under $4 million. As you can see, the regional electrical infrastructure upgrade was reduced from its full amount. The full amount is pre-authorized in fiscal 2023, but 3 other projects that were planned for funding are being deferred until fiscal 2023, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. However, for the Jessup project, there have been some scheduling delays and cost increases. Those are associated with necessary underground utility work that added $4.5 million to the budget and delayed the project by about a year. The other three projects that are being delayed are the Therapeutic Treatment Center. For those of you, or just to remind everybody, this is the replacement for the Baltimore City Detention Center that is currently being demolished. This would construct a almost 1,500 bed facility that's focused on substance use disorder and mental health treatment. This is being delayed primarily because of project scope redefinement. The cost containment actions split the project into two phases. So this is the first phase. The current $8 million in bond premium funds are being spent on planning, and that will continue this year. But the actual procurement for the design is being delayed. For the Eastern Correctional Institution High Temperature Distribution Project, that was pre-authorized for its final year of funding in fiscal 2022, but it is being deferred until fiscal 2023 because the project was at the 95% construction document level. They were above the budget, so they needed to rework some value engineering, and they did that without reducing the project scope. The next project that is delayed is the perimeter security upgrades across the state that will replace the fences at 9 correctional facilities. This is simply delayed because the project was a bit too large, a bit too much was bitten off, and there's more time needed to plan the procurement for design. There was one project removed, the furniture expansion of an MCE shop. That's being removed from the CIP because furniture is not being purchased at the rate it used to be because of COVID-19. So this expansion is no longer necessary. We recommend to approve the $3.7 million for the electrical infrastructure upgrade, as well as pre-authorizing the completion of that project next year and the completion of the ECI project in fiscal 2023. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Cash, for a wonderful analysis. Any questions for our analyst? Right, seeing none, we will turn to our department. Secretary Greene and his team. Welcome, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Barnes, Chairman Demers, Vice Chairman Zucker, and Vice Chair Chang, members of the Capital Budget Subcommittee. For the record, my name is Robert Greene. I'm the Secretary of the Department of Public Safety and Correctional Services. With me today virtually is Deputy Secretary of Operations, Mr. Wayne Hill, Chief of Staff, Ms. Rachel Sessa, and Acting Director of Capital Construction and Facilities Maintenance, Mr. John Gauthier. The department appreciates its ongoing collaboration with the Department of Legislative Services, and as always, we appreciate Mr. Cash's hard work and his thoughtful analysis. I'll keep this very brief and hopefully easy. The analysis contains 3 recommended actions, and the agency concurs with all 3 recommended actions. My team and I are happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Any questions for the department? Seeing none. Thank you for your great work. Secretary Greene, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Turn to MHEC and Mr. Quist. Samuel Quist is our analyst.
All right. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'll share my screen here. The Maryland Higher Education Commission. There are 2 grant programs, the larger Community College Construction Grant Program and the smaller Community College Facilities Renewal Grant Program. Starting with the Construction Grant Program, Exhibit 1 notes that the funding for this is a little bit different this year, the fund type. They are using $20 million in bond premium funding, so that reduces the GO bond amount to $55.88 million. The total appropriation is $75.88 million. And there is also an additional $7.556 million in program fund balance that is used in addition to the appropriated amount. So the total program cost is actually $83.4 million in total. Exhibit number 3 shows the list of the projects. I'm not going to go through each of these individually for the sake of time, but for your reference, there's a list of those in the analysis document. There are 11 different projects at 11 community colleges across the state, various items for building renovations, construction additions, maintenance, and the total cost for all the projects, as I mentioned, is $83.436 for fiscal 22, and the estimated future cost to complete these projects is $72 million approximately. The next page of the analysis, this notes there is one project included in the miscellaneous capital program, the Garrett College Community Education and Performing Arts Center project. This was a project that initially appeared in the construction, the MAC construction grant program. However, in previous fiscal years, it is taken out and funded through the miscellaneous capital program. $700,000 included in the capital budget to complete the construction for the project. For the facilities renewal grant program, the appropriation is $3.794 million in GEO bond funding. In previous years, this has been funded through PAYGO general funds. However, in fiscal 22, funding is included in GEO bond funding due to the desire for additional general fund relief. DLS is noting in the analysis that the amount mandated for this program is 5% of the appropriation for the larger construction program, which is the $75.9 million. However, this mandate of the 5%, that does not take into account the additional $7.6 million of fund balance I mentioned earlier that they're using. So that 5% amount, the $3.794 million, is lower than what that would be if the 5% was based off of the full $84.4 million that takes into account the use of the fund balance for the construction program. So DLS is noting that depending on if the intent of the committees is that this program has a minimum mandated funding amount, there would have to be an amendment made to statute to set that at either $4 million, which is the 5% planned of the $80 million for the larger program, or 5% if it's larger than that $4 million amount. But since that 5% is set in statute, there would have to be an amendment to the statute made there. As far as the programmed amount in fiscal 22, the exhibit number 4 shows the 8 colleges that are receiving funding. There are 474,000 awards for 8 of those colleges. Exhibit number 5 shows 2 cost containment actions that were taken for this program in fiscal 20 and 21. This was funded, the program was funded through PAYGO general funds in these 2 years. In fiscal 20, there was a $2.791 million reduction. In fiscal 21, the full $4 million for the program was reduced. However, the governor's fiscal 22 operating budget includes a proposed deficiency appropriation of $6.791 million, which would restore the total funding for both fiscal years that was reduced, and that would come from special funds from the annuity bond fund. Lastly, there are 2 pre-authorizations for the larger construction grant program for fiscal 23 and 24 for the continuation of the construction for the projects that are funded in fiscal 22. As far as the recommended actions, there's 1 PAYGO recommendation. This is to approve the deficiency appropriation for the funding that was reduced through cost containment for the facility renewal program. For GEO bond recommended actions, recommendations number 1 and number 5 go together for the construction grant program. This is number 1 is the $55.88 million in GEO bond funding, and number 5 is the $20 million in bond premium that make up the $75.8 million appropriation for that program. Recommendation number 2 is to approve the funding for the facilities renewal grant program for fiscal 22. And recommendations 3 and 4 are for the pre-authorizations for the construction program for fiscal 23. That concludes my presentation, and I can take any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Mr. Quist, for the thorough analysis. Are there any questions for analysts? See any? So let's move on to the agency. We have 2 folks testifying today. Secretary Fiedler from MHEC. You're on. Secretary on? If not, let's go to, we can come back.
Um,
Good. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yep, this is Jeff Newman, Assistant Secretary of Finance and Administration. I'm
That'd
not
be great.
sure
Thank
if the Secretary stayed on. He did have some other commitments. We do administer the Community College Construction Grant Program as well as the Facilities Renewal Grant Programs. And we are concurring with the PAYGO recommended action, the two recommended actions for fiscal 2022, the general obligation and bond premium recommendations, the deficiency recommendation as well, and the pre-authorizations for fiscal 2023. So we concur with all those recommendations.
Thank you. Any questions for MHEC? So thank you, Mr. Newman, for
Thank
being
you.
with us. Mr. Sadusky, you are also signed up on this.
Yes.
You have a president with you, so just please briefly, you're on.
Okay, just for the record, Bernie Sadusky, Maryland Association of Community Colleges. We concur with the analysis and all the recommended actions. I want to especially thank the DLS analysts for the suggested action of establishing a minimum amount for the facilities renewal program. So with that, we do have a special request from Montgomery College about some additional funding, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pollard.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, and to members of the committee. I understand that brevity would be deeply appreciated, so I'll simply offer two comments. One, I'd ask that you fully fund the capital request for your community colleges as recommended by the governor's budget. And secondly, I would ask that you support an additional $1.5 million for furniture and equipment for the Leggett Math and Science Building on our Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus to bring the state share of the cost up to the requisite 50% to equip this building fully. I'm always happy to provide more, but I suspect you've been well briefed on the conversations thus far, and I'll pause at that point.
Thank you, Dr. Pollard, and thanks for the great work you do for the students of Maryland. We appreciate you. And with brevity, I should have mentioned at the outset that the Senate does need to vote this afternoon and get back on the Senate floor. So we are trying to move along, but we always have time for you, Dr. Pollard. So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any questions for the community colleges? Okay. With that, we'll turn to our final agency of Housing and Community Development. Emily Haskell is our analyst. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, pages 1 and 2. My name is Emily Haskell for the record, and I'll be presenting the capital budget analysis for the Department of Housing and Community Development. Pages 1 and 2 show an overview of the 2021 Capital Improvement Program, or CIP, for all of DHCD's programs. And the chart at the bottom of page 2 shows past appropriations in the CIP by year, broken down by fund source. As you can see, funding for DHCD's capital programs increases slightly in fiscal 2022 compared to fiscal 2021 to a total of $216.1 million. This increase is driven largely by $27.5 million in GO bonds, offset by a $12.6 million decline in federal funds and smaller decreases in general and special funds. As you can see in Exhibit 1 on page 5, although fiscal 2022 funding increases only a little compared to the fiscal 2021 level, the overall spending planned in the CIP this year has increased significantly compared to the amount planned last year. This is primarily due to a $55 million increase in the planned amount for fiscal 2022, with increases across most of DHCD's programs, with the largest increases for rental housing, neighborhood business works, and the Strategic Demolition Fund. Before getting back to fiscal 2022, there are a couple things to note for prior years. In May, the Board of Public Works reduced fiscal 2020 funding for the Baltimore Regional Neighborhood Initiative by $4.2 million and for the Strategic Demolition Fund by $775,000. Projects that did not receive funding due to these cuts in fiscal 2020 were awarded funds in fiscal 2021 instead. The Board of Public Works also made reductions to the fiscal 2021 budget of $3 million for the National Capital Strategic Economic Development Program and $2 million for the Seed Community Development Anchor Institution Fund. The fiscal 2022 budget includes the full mandated funding for each of these programs, $7 million for the National Capital Program and $10 million for Seed. The fiscal 2022 budget plan also includes a deficiency appropriation for fiscal 2021 for the Strategic Demolition Fund using bond premiums. This funding will be awarded to projects that were unfunded or underfunded in the fiscal 2020 or 2021 application rounds. Exhibit 2, beginning on page 7, includes information on each of the department's capital programs, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on a few. Rental housing programs make up the largest share of the HCD's capital budget, accounting for just under 30% of the total. As you can see, in Exhibit 3 on page 11, funding for rental housing programs has grown significantly over time from less than $40 million in fiscal 2016 to $73 million in fiscal 2021 and $62.5 million in the fiscal 2022 budget. Although fiscal 2022 funding is lower than the prior year, the budget includes $16 million more for the program that was planned in last year's CIP, including $12 million more in GO bond funding. The HCD estimates the increased funding will create or preserve an additional 720 affordable rental units. Home ownership programs are the next largest piece of DHCD's capital budget, with $26 million in fiscal 2022. This includes $6 million in GO bonds over the planned amount, which DHCD estimates can be used to assist around 950 home buyers. Exhibit 4 on page 12 shows the record level of home ownership assistance DHCD provided in fiscal 2020. The number of mortgages financed through DHCD nearly doubled to over 4,700, and the number of households that received down payment assistance increased by 75% to just under 2,500. I'll turn now to the Local Government Infrastructure Fund, which supports the expansion of rural broadband infrastructure. The fiscal 2022 budget includes a little over $15 million in GO bonds for the program, which is an increase of $5 million over the planned amount. Some of the increase is due to $1.3 million that was shifted from the operating to the capital budget, and the rest of the increase is to facilitate the acceleration of projects due to the anticipated excess demand for fiscal 2021 funding. In fiscal 2020, the Office of Rural Broadband made awards in 3 sub-programs. Exhibit 8 on page 17 shows the largest of those, $7.3 million awarded to 4 projects in the Broadband Infrastructure Grant Program, which funds up to 50% of the construction costs for new broadband networks in unserved areas. These projects have until September 2023 to use the grant funding, and DHCD expects construction to begin this spring. These awards were made in May 2020, and as of last month, only Maryland Broadband Cooperative had drawn funds totaling $370,000. DHCD advises that grantees will typically use the first 6 to 8 months to complete design and preparatory work before beginning major construction. Finally, I'd like to discuss CDA's use of non-budgeted funding to supplement DHCD's budgeted capital programs. CDA generates its funding through the sale of tax-exempt revenue bonds, taxable bonds, and mortgage-backed securities, and its funding is often used in tandem with other DHCD funds. As shown in Exhibit 11 on page 20, CDA has used non-budgeted funds to supplement its down payment assistance programs and neighborhood business works, including over $40 million estimated for fiscal 2021. While these additional funds can provide needed support to these programs, it's important to have transparency on the total funds available for budgeted programs. DLS recommends adding budget language that would require DHCD to report the use of CDA funds for its budgeted programs with its annual budget request to DBM, which should then be made available to the budget committees for the capital budget submission. DLS has also asked DHCD to comment on how the department determines how and when CDA funds are used to supplement DHCD's capital programs. The DLS recommendations are shown on pages 23 to 25, including the suggested language on the use of non-budgeted funds. Otherwise, DLS concurs with the governor's proposed budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Haskell, for a wonderful analysis as always. Any questions for the analyst? Seeing none, I think we are joined by Secretary Holt and his team, or anyone from the department that is here. Please, you are on.
Thank you. Emily, what a great analysis. We're very appreciative, and we concur with your recommendation.
All right, fantastic. Any questions for the department? All right, we do have a number of witnesses here for DHCD. Given our time constraints, we're going to do a minute per witness. So we are starting with Jessica Zuniga.
Hi. Good afternoon, Chairman Peters, Chairman Barnes, and members of the subcommittees. My name is Jessica Zuniga, and I'm the owner of Foundation Development Group, an affordable housing development company located in Howard County. I'm also the board president of the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition. I'm here today in support of the governor's budget for the DHCD's rental housing programs. The pandemic has reminded us all of the importance of a stable home. Too many Marylanders are currently struggling with their housing stability, and many were struggling even before the pandemic. A key factor in stable housing is affordability. Now more than ever, we should be investing in the creation and preservation of affordable housing stock to support Marylanders as we begin our recovery. The state investment in affordable housing to create new homes will also support our recovering economy through job creation and private investment. The rental housing programs are a driver of private investment and job growth. Rental Housing Works is the shining example of this. In just 9 years, the program has leveraged over $2 billion in private investment, which amounts to $12 to every one state dollar loaned under the program. It has also created 17,045 new jobs. Rental housing funds, partnership rental housing program funds, and the federal pass-through dollars are also used as gap financing, where the state's resources are paired with other private investment, and it also creates new jobs. Each of the rental housing programs have distinct differences in how they are used to give the DHCD the ability to support varied housing development types, a wide range of income levels, and to be utilized across the state. Every one of these rental housing programs and the dollars allocated to them are needed to support Marylanders and our economy as we recover from the impacts of the pandemic over the coming years. Thank you for the opportunity to express my support for the governor's budget as proposed.
Thank you, and thank you for being with us and all the work that you do. Any questions for this witness? Okay, seeing none, thank you again. We will turn to Miranda Willems.
Good afternoon, Chairman Barnes, Chairman Peters, and members of the subcommittees. My name is Miranda Darden Willems, and I'm the director of the Maryland Affordable Housing Coalition. Our member organizations use DHCD financing to create affordable rental housing communities across Maryland. Our members include developers, lenders, property managers, contractors, and government agencies. We hold a housing day every year in Annapolis, so you probably met with our members last month during our virtual Housing Day event. I'm here today in support of the governor's proposed budget for rental housing programs. DHCD programs provide the necessary financing for our developers to continue to build more affordable housing units. These funds are loans that are repaid to the state with interest, so this is a good use of state resources. Rental Housing Works was created 9 years ago, and 90 properties, including 10,000 housing units, have been funded using this program. Another 39 applications can't move forward until new funds are available. In addition to creating more affordable housing, these projects bring private investment and jobs into our communities and will help the Maryland economy recover from this pandemic. Thank you for your support, and we ask for you to adopt the DHCD rental housing budget as proposed.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Willems, for your testimony and being with us and all your work. Are there any questions? Seeing none, thank you again. We'll turn to Isabel Trujillo. If I'm pronouncing that correctly. If not, I apologize. Welcome. Okay, if you are with us and having some technical difficulties, hop on and we will get back to you. Not hearing from you now, we'll turn our attention to Marthanathanson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today about the seed funding program. I concur with the recommendation for full funding. You will note in my testimony that I did mention $5 million. That is an error. I will resubmit my testimony. I'm asking for the full funding. SEED is a real gift to hospitals and universities. As we look at, as a hospital executive, I'm sorry, my name is Marthanathanson. I'm Vice President for Government Relations and Community Development at LifeBridge Health, serving some of the areas in Northwest Baltimore, West Baltimore, Carroll County, and the Randallstown area of Northwest Baltimore County. This is truly a way for us to look outside our hospital walls and to be incentivized to do that. As hospital providers, obviously, we need to have the most up-to-date, modern equipment and facilities to serve our patients, but we also need to look outside. And when I make arguments with my exec team about the need to invest in physical structures outside of our walls, this is something that really helps me make that argument for them. And as an example of one of the projects that we're going to be applying for, we're going to try to connect the Jones Falls Trail that runs from downtown through the northwest area of Baltimore along the Jones Falls, across the Sinai campus, across Belvedere Avenue, if you know the area next to the racetrack, and connecting it to that amazing development that's coming online at the Pimlico racetrack. This is exactly the kind of shared use path that's needed to connect these and to bring people into that neighborhood, both as cyclists, both as walkers, to really bring up the activity in the area. So I urge full funding, and I also urge you to keep it competitive so that it can be used across the state and be available for many applicants. And with that, I'll close with any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nathanson. Thank you for being with us today. Questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. Great to see you. Willie Moore is next. Mr. Moore.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Peters and Barnes and the committee members for allowing me to testify this afternoon. My name is Willie Moore, and I'm president of Southway Builders, a Maryland-based general contractor. Our first project 30 years ago was a low-income housing tax credit or affordable housing project, and we've been building affordable housing every year since. This afternoon, I'd like to take a brief moment and speak to you about the power of Rental Housing Works funds and their impacts on the state's economy. In the last 9 years since the program's inception, the Southway has built 11 projects with Rental Housing Works funds, and we have 5 more in the pipeline right now. Those 16 projects represent a total of over 4,000 jobs created as a direct benefit to the state from their investment through Rental Housing Works. Since the inception of the pandemic, we have had 5 projects with Rental Housing Works funds under construction. Those 5 projects had just over 12 million in Rental Housing Works dollars that were leveraged to over 160 million of total investment in the state, with over 1,300 jobs, all during a period of economic collapse. In one project alone, J. Van Story Branch in Baltimore City, we've logged 169,633 man hours of work, which is over 21,000 man days. These workers are all making great family supporting wages, with many being paid well over $25 an hour. Obviously, this is a terrific boost to the state's economy, especially during the pandemic. Over the coming months, as we work our way out of the pandemic, I know of no more productive way for the state to kickstart the economy than through the swift benefit of job creation through affordable housing. Simply stated, I ask that you please adopt DHCD's rental housing budget as proposed. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moore. Are there any questions for Mr. Moore? Okay, seeing none, thank you, sir, for being with us today. I think the remaining witnesses are all with the department, but let me give an opportunity in case I've missed anyone. Is there anyone that I've missed? Speak now. Okay, looks like we haven't. We got everyone, so that's great. DHCD, I think our last agency department we're going to hear from today are the local jails and detention centers. Mr. Cash is our analyst.
Mr. Chair, local jails and detention centers are written only.
Okay, that's what it says. So with that, I think that we are finished for the day and adjourned. Thank you, committee, for being so efficient today, and good luck to the Senate. See you soon.